Hi, everyone. Welcome to Huddle Up with Working Triathlete. I'm head coach of Working Triathlete, Conrad. The purpose of this series is to spotlight coached athletes, have a conversation with them, and give you an opportunity to have a glimpse behind the curtain here at Working Triathlete. Today, we are speaking with Miguel Mattox. Miguel is an incredible triathlete who I've had the pleasure of working with over the last couple of years. He has set a bunch of course records, won a bunch of races, and he's on the fast track to potentially going pro. He is a former Division I collegiate swimmer at Fordham University and is typically based out of New York City. Miguel, welcome, and introduce yourself, if you will. Give everybody a sense of your background.
Conrad, thanks so much for having me on. This is cool to kick off the series. I am 24 years old. Typically, I would say I'm based in New York City, but that is no longer the case due to the pandemic that we're in. I work for a digital health company based out of New York City because of the whole shelter-in-place things. Myself, my girlfriend, and a couple other friends are traveling the country a little bit, hopping from Airbnb to Airbnb. We are all working remotely. So it's kind of an interesting time for us. We're making the most of it. As far as my background, I'm actually from the San Francisco Bay Area, born and raised there. My parents, both super athletes. We kind of were raised in a community of ultra athletes. And my mom was actually a top-ranked marathoner, triathlete back in her day. She actually qualified for Kona a couple times.
Back in the glory days.
Back in the glory days when, we were all fitted with the hot pink neon 80s attire, which we should bring back, by the way.
I know.
You're working on that, right?
Yes, we're on it.
So kind of born into that whole lifestyle community of athletics and, crazy people. But for me, I was fortunate enough to not have that be crazy. That was just my parents, my friends, my community. So, my mom actually had this master plan because swimming was her worst event in the triathlon. She pushed my brother and I to be swimmers, hopefully breed us to be good triathletes. And sure enough, it worked for me. Her plan worked. And I went to college and swam, graduated a few years ago.
And what were your PRs, your swim PRs? Or your
Yeah, the swim PRs.
Heard you had a very fast, what was it, 200 back?
200 back. I'll tell you about my favorite race ever. It was the last race that I ever did in college. I had my eyes on this 15-year-old school record all 4 years I was in college. And conference my senior year, I made the finals, got up on the blocks. It was kind of like a screw it, this is my last race ever, no pressure. And I ended up setting that school record. Obviously, it was a personal best for me. It was a 147 something for 200 back. It was pretty fun. The whole thing was a blur. My parents were there. Whole team was jumping on the side. It was quite a memory.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's exciting. So then, obviously, after college, a lot of collegiate athletes they're looking for something else to fill that empty space where competition used to reside. So
yeah, that is exactly the case. It was like I knew so many people. I still know so many people that graduate college athletics and are in a way searching for an identity, because that's how you defined yourself for 4 years, even more like your whole life. It's like, I'm a swimmer, I'm a runner, then you graduate college and it ends just like flipping off a light switch. So yeah. It was hard, especially going to New York, where like all of my friends were into the nightlife scene, exploring the city. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, but that only is sustainable for maybe 6 months. and then becomes not a great habit. But yeah, my coworker at the time, Mr. Jake Hungarter, my boy, he introduced me to his good old cousin Conrad, who is a certified Ironman coach. At the time, I had no idea what I wanted to do in the sport, but he was all gung ho about doing an Ironman. So it's like, I'll do it with you. So thankfully, I got connected with the man himself, and here I am a couple years later, still doing it. Have not done an Ironman yet, but you know,
No,
gotten talked out of that multiple times.
one day. I think with you, you just have so much potential at the Olympic distance because your swim background, the ability to come out of the water in the front. And last year at Nationals in Cleveland, you were right there at the front, out of the water, and you led the race on the bike. And I think you got off the bike and at least top five, might have been top three, and then you finished up there. I think you were.
It was the shortened swim.
Right.
It was the shortened swim.
Which truly makes a huge difference when you can swim, you know, even with the short swim, you put 2.5, 3 minutes into the eventual winner, and then multiply that by 2 and do the math, you'd be right there. So, you're obviously capable of going well under 20 minutes in the swim, and then cycling, well under 60 minutes for the 40K, and then the 10K. That's where you're progressing as well. So, bike for show, run for dough, and you're getting obviously much faster. So low 30s is that will happen. Hopefully this
doesn't seem crazy anymore.
But
yeah. So Conrad, I have a question for you, and I've always kind of been curious about. I don't know who else you've coached, like coming fresh out of college. It's obviously like a hard sport to get into at my age because of the expenses that go into it. It's like not an easy sport for someone my age to be able to afford. I had a lot of friends that helped me along the way, thankfully. But like, what was your approach to like coaching, someone who was not new to athletics, someone my age who was like obviously very ambitious about doing this? Like, I don't know, how did you coach me? How did you figure me out?
So everybody is different, and people have different levels of motivation, and they have different reasons for getting into triathlon. And with former athletes, they tend to be more committed, and they tend to have that inherent motivation. So for the top athletes, honestly, it's more about, it's almost more about reining them in and preventing them from training too hard or getting hurt. But coming out of college, there a lot of times especially with swimmers, their engine doesn't necessarily match the resiliency of the rest of their body. So their cardio, respiratory fitness is usually very high, but their propensity for getting injured is also high if they just ramp up volume too quickly. So, for you, obviously you had the swim experience, and then you took to the bike well, and then we slowly just focus on building run mileage. The good thing about triathlon is that there's a lot of crossover benefit cycling to running. So you can cycle a lot, you'll get good at running until a point. But so out of college, you swim background, the idea and the approach was similar to the approach I take with a lot of athletes, which is really attack the bike. The bike is low impact, and just build that foundation of cardiorespiratory fitness and just slowly build run mileage. And that's what we've been doing with you. And now we haven't done an open 5K in a while, but I imagine you're probably in the 16s, and starting out, you were probably just around fitness probably put you around maybe 20-minute 5K. And then on the bike, obviously you've improved dramatically, probably increased your FTP by over 20% since starting. But for I have coached other athletes out of college, and costs, obviously it's a real factor in triathlon. So the approach is just focusing on the fundamentals. You obviously need a bike, but you don't need a super expensive time trial bike up front. There are
I
ways.
think that's important to make clear. Like I actually, if you remember the first year that you coached me, I had the road bike that I had at my parents' house that I got shipped to New York.
Yep.
And I had $100 trainer that I would just stick the wheel on and go. And I had a heart rate monitor. And I didn't even have a power meter for the first year that you coached me.
Right.
And that got the job done. I remember I went into New York City Triathlon with that setup. I borrowed a time trial bike for the race and won my age group. Like I didn't need the fancy equipment. But
exactly.
yeah, I think that was pretty cool.
It's not about the equipment. It's about the engine and how much power you can put out. We've reached sort of peak era when it comes to time trial bikes, triathlon bikes, and it's just not going to make a difference. What's going to make a difference is how much time you spend on the thing. As long as you can get your position dialed in, you will go fast on the bike. Just keep a clean drivetrain, and 2010 Cervelo P2 is going to be just as fast as the latest and greatest super bike. So it comes down to dialing in your position, having the discipline to stay aero, and then just putting out power. So you're good evidence of that.
Wait, so I hear this a lot too, because I'm from a swimmer background. Like, oh, swimmers have an engine. What's an engine? How do you define like someone who just has a good engine?
How much oxygen can your body process? And so engine, you think about Michael Phelps, his VO2 max is probably, I don't know what it is, but just from swimming, I'm sure it's probably about 70 via some metric. But so he has the ability to take an oxygen and convert that to energy, and he has the ability to really function at a high effort. So put out a lot of power just inherently due to a swim fitness. So if you were to run, there is also obviously economy and run specific fitness and form, but he would be able to ramp his running up probably faster. He would have his heart and lungs would have the ability to probably run well, but his heart and soft tissues probably couldn't keep up with it. So really, when I talk about engine, I talk about cardiorespiratory fitness.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that a swimmer can hop on a bike and immediately put out 300 watts for an hour. You still have to build up to it, but the potential is always higher, and progress will usually come faster. You probably reach your genetic potential in one of the other sports sooner than if you did another sport for years than if you were just starting from ground zero in everything.
Yeah. That's like you mentioned too, that's also pretty interesting that the athletes that you coach are like the ones that come from an athletic background. Like your coaching has to be more like, all right, take a step back, calm down, like let's ease off the volume or else you're going to get hurt. I feel that constantly. I always feel the need to, like, even if I'm feeling shitty one day, like wake up and do what's on the schedule. Even if it's not going to be good for me. I've tried to teach myself the habit of, if I'm not feeling well, to tell you about it. And that way you will tell me to not do the workout.
Yes. And sometimes athletes need that. And it's important for, a coach and athlete to be in constant communication, because that's sort of the whole point of having a coach. It's to, a coach can deliver an objective sort of third-party view of what's going on. And sort of with that separation, there's usually less emotion, and it's tough to be sort of self-reflective and self-critical, if it means sort of slowing down for the best athletes.
Yeah.
And
You just want to go all the time.
you just want to go all the time. And that's, you know,
Yeah.
that is fine at certain times, especially in the middle of a race. That's good. Or in the middle of a hard workout, you're in the middle of a VO2 workout, you're doing whatever, 6 by 4 minutes at 115% of your FTP. That kind of hunger is what makes you fit, and it makes you competitive. But, you know, over a macro cycle, you have to apply effort during certain workouts and then lay off other workouts, so that during the key workouts you can accomplish those well. And it's not like, it isn't a moderate effort for every workout. Certain workouts, the supporting ones, they should be easy, just accruing volume and time in the zone, usually zone 2. And then the key workouts, there's a purpose, and those are the workouts that really advance fitness, and those are the ones you want to protect on the schedule. So if you're a busy athlete, if you need to trim, you want to trim the supporting sessions. You want to put the key intensity, key endurance sessions in your calendar, and make sure that you can do those well. So get good night's rest before, and recovery is another big thing. You mentioned nightlife and propensity of a lot of people to drink a lot and to stay up late and go out, and that a lot of people fresh out of college, that is a common you know, sort of detriment to their training, because if you are out late at night, you're not recovering. So you know, there's a time and a place.
It's good to get it out of your system though. Yeah, exactly. Like, I am fortunate, you know, for my well-being, that I did not start triathlons the day I graduated from college. I had a nice 6 months to move to Brooklyn, live with kids my age, have a new group of friends, enjoy nightlife, you know, without a distraction of training. And 6 months later, I was like, I'm really sick of this. Like, what's the next part of my life going to be? For me, it was like, I really missed training, as weird as that sounds. Like, I love training. So found the right sport, I think.
You did. It's funny because everybody kind of needs a purpose to living, and triathlon, it's a nice way to find that, because it's a measurable endeavor where you can measure progress, and ultimately humans are wired to progress in whatever, you know, realm they're pursuing, whether it's guitar or swim, bike, run. And triathlon is unique in that there are 3 disciplines, so there's always something to work on, and it's a massive puzzle. So it's difficult to put that puzzle together correctly so that you can do a triathlon fast. And it's always a cost benefit analysis. You swim more, you're taking time away from cycling. And if you're a weak cyclist, it's probably good to focus on cycling, especially in long course triathlon, which you don't focus on. But it's always an individual analysis when it comes to scheduling. And speaking of scheduling, obviously you're a busy person. You're in a pretty demanding job, and you put in the work in the office, but also you train well. Your Training Peaks account is just a solid green block. So you essentially do every workout. You don't miss workouts, and that consistency is part of the reason that you are a great athlete, one of the top athletes in the country. So
I'm gonna say, like, it's nice to have 3 disciplines to get better at. Like, you can always get better at something, but you can always you also have 3 disciplines to get worse at too.
Yeah, that's true.
That's part of the motivating factor for me too, is like, if I'm not doing something, I'm getting worse at it. So it's just, I'm constantly like, shit, what can I be doing to get better? Or to not get worse almost. So anyways, yeah, no, I think for me, like, the motivation comes from just being consistent. I think I learned how to be consistent somewhere like halfway through college, probably between sophomore and junior year. The first 2 years of my swimming career in college were not great. I didn't really stick to a disciplined diet. I got sick a lot. I skipped workouts. And at the end of the year, you get to champs and you're all psyched up to swim fast, and then you don't, and you're like down at yourself, and it's like, why didn't I swim fast? And I did everything leading up to the race correctly, but you hardly ever look at the big picture and like all the little steps that it takes to get to champs and to swim fast, which isn't just like the lead up, or isn't just the meal you have the night before. It's all the little things. It's like literally your life leads up to that one race. So, I took that summer between sophomore and junior year to like kind of regimen my life, figure out what I needed to do to like get myself in shape, like physically. Like I think I lost like 15 pounds that summer. Not advisable unless you like actually need to lose that weight, which I definitely did. Cafeteria food, everyone knows about college cafeteria food. But yeah, and a lot of like getting into shape too is just like the mental aspect of like learning to not necessarily like make sacrifices. I don't like when people ask me like, why do you sacrifice this to like do your sport? Or like, I don't look at it like I'm making sacrifices. I've just kind of like let go of the need to reward myself on a short-term basis. Or like short-term gratification, I've just kind of like taught myself to let go of that. Not necessarily like restrict myself from having it, but just let go of the need to have it. I think there's a huge difference there. So junior and senior year of my college swimming was phenomenal. I went on to be elected captain of my swim team. I think people just kind of recognized like not necessarily what I was doing in the pool. There were still people faster than me, but this kid knows how to work hard. This kid knows how to lead by example. And I, so that period of my life just kind of taught me like how to be good at something on a consistent basis. And to be good at one thing, you need to surround that one thing with everything else good. So like if I want to be good at swimming, I have to be good at school. I have to be good at eating correctly. I have to be good at the relationships that I'm in. And that all leads to being better at that one thing. So I've kind of brought that into where I am today. It's, like to be good in my A race at the end of the summer, I need these weeks to be all green. I know you put them there for a reason. I know, and part of it is trusting your coach, obviously, too. Like I am fortunate enough to have a coach that knows exactly, you know me better than I know me at this point, especially in the sport of triathlon. So you put these workouts there for a reason. If I don't do it, I'm getting worse at something. That's the way I'm thinking about it. But, also seeing these perfect green weeks mean that, it motivates me for the next week to get ready for those key workouts, to complete every workout like I should be doing. And again, to like surround all that good with other parts of my life too. Eating correctly, healthy relationships, all that good stuff.
Yeah, just habits of excellence in every life. Habits breed consistency, which breeds greatness. And I would say that the biggest limiter, biggest thing that sort of stifles progress in triathlon is just lack of consistency. And it's not, obviously there, over a macro cycle, there is a trajectory for training, and it's good to do certain workouts at certain times and have phases to training. But ultimately, it isn't like a baking recipe. It isn't like if you do this, you'll do this. It's just what it comes down to is consistency and just being the type of person who does the workouts. When you become the type of person who does the workouts, all of a sudden you're the type of person who also performs well at work. You're the type of person who who also shows up for their other responsibilities or obligations and executes those well. So that's a great point. And I think that, your experience is pretty common. Type A triathlete.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say too, it's like, it's not that hard once you do it, once you start to build those habits of excellence and, finish your workouts on time, wake up on time, get to bed on time, and start doing things well. Like, it just falls into place. It becomes second nature to do those things. It's just the hardest part is like stringing a couple days together of doing that. But once you do, it's like it's kind of addicting. That's like all you can do. And for me, the hardest part is like, if you fall off that wagon for just like a day, like for me, it's traveling. Like traveling is, and I'm sure that's everyone too. It's like a day of travel screws everything up, and it takes like a day to 2 days to get back into that flow of like being good at stuff again. Like when I travel, I'm like, oh, like I just want to eat a burger now. I just want to have a beer. I don't want to do my workout tomorrow because I'm traveling. Like, I don't know, these like excuses of, getting off that train, they just appear, and it's hard to shake them. But yeah, it's just like, again, though, like once you start it back up again and get into that flow for a day or two, it's like, it becomes easy again.
It's about directing that momentum, and it can go either way. If you're consistent and you're executing upon positive habits, you're getting your workouts in, the decision to work out has already been made each day. You're going to do it. It's a conclusion. That momentum builds upon itself, but it can also go the other way. And if you miss a couple days or something, it's easy to keep those bad habits going. And then, it just takes a couple days of just faith and drudgery, and then just doing the workouts and going into each workout after a layoff without expectations. It's just about doing it, and then you get better.
Yeah.
So no, those are good, very good insights.
One of your points for conversation here, I'm going to jump to it real quick because it's a nice segue, but dating a triathlete. So I am dating a triathlete, Jenna Hoffler, obviously coached by you as well. I think that's one of the areas where it's like hugely beneficial to have a partner that also does this sport, where it's like it's harder to fall off the train of like good momentum. And when you do, you have someone else who's motivating you to get back on it. And it works both ways too. Like if I have a bad day, she probably didn't have a bad day. She's probably excited about her workout, ready to eat a good meal, ready to wake up the next day and do it again. And if that's going to happen, I have no choice. I have to do the same thing. Or else I'll get yelled at. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely good to have a partner who at least understands.
Yeah.
But yes, no, you guys make a great team, and Jenna is also an incredible athlete. Maybe we'll have a discussion with her on a Zoom.
Gotta have her on.
Meeting as well. But yes, so it is good to have somebody who understands and overcoming those challenges. And what do you think the biggest challenge is in adhering to a consistent plan? I know you mentioned travel, but where's the motivation? Maybe is another way. What is the motivation that allows you to keep the momentum going? Is it or what's your why for triathlon?
I think it's it's interesting that you're like grouping challenge and motivation into the same bucket, but I think that's spot on. And for me, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's like, there's this short-term versus long-term gratification. And if you've never experienced long-term gratification in your life, I highly encourage you to do it because it is the most rewarding thing ever. For me, the ultimate taste that I had of it, which is probably why I'm doing triathlons, was, looking at that college school record for 4 years. It was a 15-year-old school record, and doing everything I could over those 4 years to get it, especially the latter 2 years. And then when I got it, it was just like the ultimate feeling. And it was like a reward for everything, every minute of practice, every early morning that you've put yourself through. It all just comes together, and it's just so perfect and blissful that like you need more of it.
Yeah.
But obviously the only way to get more of that is to get back to that long-term mentality. And I think like the challenges that come with that is like every day there is going to be 1,000 voices yelling at you to reach for that short-term gratification, because it's so easy. We have access to so much comfort in our lives today that like it is so easy to go out and get some fast food, get a beer. Nothing wrong with beer. I love beer, but like, you know, it's easy to have a lot of it on any given day. And you know, I think for me, it's like, I love saying no to those short-term things that are coming at me from every angle. I love, you know, almost like proving people wrong in a way. I like, you know, knowing that there are people out there, the majority of the population, that is living a comfortable life, but like, I don't want to live a comfortable life. I want to, you know, work really hard every day and achieve something that, you know, or a level of gratification, again, using the word, but a level of gratification that not too many people have gotten to. I think that's like my ultimate goal in triathlon is, you know, work that hard to get to a space where not too many people have been before.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think because long-term goals in pursuit of those are what give life meaning. If you don't have I mean, humans are wired to work hard and experience gratification or pleasure from accomplishing goals, whether it was going out and
Mm-hmm.
hunting woolly mammoths or deer, or fishing or whatever, and then the gratification of eating at the end of the day, or you know, building a pyramid or building whatever. So
Dude, if there were still mammoths roaming the earth, I would totally be the one out there on the front lines trying to hunt them down. That would be me.
yes, I
Be
love
chasing them for weeks at a time, like, you know, tracking them. That, yeah. That's the dream.
totally. And you, I personally think that humans need that meaning and purpose, and when you don't have that, when you just are living off of just short spikes of dopamine by scrolling down on your phone, or I mean, you have, you know, immediate access to whatever content you imagine, and it's just immediate access to whatever food you want. It's just it can be bad for us because we lose the ability to focus on goals and sort of long-term goals that give people, you know, purpose. And then if you don't have that, you kind of get depressed. And you know, so triathlon is good. It's good for instilling a sense of purpose in people's lives. And it's interesting because now with COVID-19, we're in the midst of a pandemic, and a lot of people's their races have been canceled, and there's less clarity on, you know, maybe there's less clarity on the why right now, and the discipline to do workouts day to day for a lot of people, it might be challenged if they're training only to race. But then, you know, a lot of people I work with, they're also actually enjoying training more because some of the pressure is off, and they're doing it for almost its own sake, stress relief, and you know, just having some structure to the day. It's nice. But you know, it's a unique time for sure.
How have you like adapted people's training to this? Because I'm sure there are people that are like enjoying it more. Those are probably the more coachable athletes right now. I hope I'm one of them. I'm enjoying training now more than ever because I have more time to do it. I'm living with Jenna, and I'm, you know, in really beautiful parts of the country. But then there's that other group that, you know, might be training for that one race, and that's canceled now.
Right.
Like, how are you how are you looking at those two groups of athletes, or maybe there are more groups, but like what's kind of changed for you as a coach?
So COVID-19 happens, and essentially everybody's near-term races were canceled. And so the response to that is, right now it's essentially off season, but it's an extended off season. So people are coming off of a winter of training where they weren't racing, and there are different approaches that one takes in the off season. You lay a foundation of fitness, technique, and whatnot, but one can only do that for so long before they might get restless. And so right now we're approaching May, which is when normally you're building towards your first race of the year. And so for people who need that carrot to give a purpose to training, or to people who just want to give a supreme effort in a race, there are ways to do that. So a bunch of athletes who I work with did our Zwift race. So that was a 27-mile, just all-out effort. So and that was a true race. I mean, people woke early, had a good breakfast, and they got on the bike, and it was structured similarly to a race. There was a little, taper going into it for certain athletes, and you can take Zwift racing as seriously or unseriously as you want. There's a lot of noise in there. It's a video game, but it's nice to have that. And other athletes were picking sort of unique challenges. So whether that's training for a 100-mile solo bike race, or maybe it's a multi-day event where somebody wants to bike the entire Natchez Trace, which is a long scenic road that goes from town in Mississippi all the way to Nashville. And it's an iconic road, sort of like the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I think it's 440 miles. So that's a goal for one athlete. And then there's also time trialing. So, and maybe somebody wants to break 20 minutes in a 5K by themselves on a track. That's one approach. But there's also other approach. So for a lot of athletes, we're just trying to build their FTP on the bike. So we have an 8-week block, and we're emphasizing cycling training right now, with the goal of literally increasing that number. And that can give a sense of purpose to training. Alternatively, if somebody wants to get better at running, then now is a good time to really emphasize running and maybe sacrifice a little bit of swim or cycling volume. So, there are a bunch of approaches.
It's interesting too, because, the way I look at it, like races obviously have a lot of pros. Like you need to race to get good at racing.
Yep.
And it's fun. Like it was interesting just doing the Zwift race yesterday. Like clock counting down, I was like right next to Jenna on the trainer, but we were like a little bit nervous, like as the clock is counting down, because like we went to bed earlier than usual. We had a good meal, like, woke up earlier than usual and approached it like a race. And when you do that, you like your mind goes to a different place, which is awesome. Like you get that's irreplaceable. But it's also, races can be kind of a distraction, especially if you're long-term driven like I am. It's like if you are doing 5 different races throughout the season, which is the summer for triathletes, it's like each one of those is going to take, the periodization where like you are doing race specific training, and then you have the week after where like you need to chill, recover. That all kind of removes, time that you could be using to like practice and train. So in a way, for me, it's like getting these races off the calendar. It sucks obviously, but you can look at it as a positive. You can look at it as an opportunity to not have those distractions and just like get better all year. Like there is nothing that is going to stop you from training now and to like practice and get better at this stuff. And for me, like I have a lot of holes in my racing still, running being one of them. Like I just get to run a lot now. Like I don't need to really like save my legs for a race that's going to pop up in a couple weeks. It's just a matter of practicing and getting better. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
I agree. So, I mean, there are a couple ways to look at it. I mean, every time you race, if you do it the way a lot of people do it, is you taper going into a race and then you have to recover and sort of reverse taper coming out of it. Throughout that entire time, your training load is lower, so you're losing fitness. However, that doesn't mean that every race you have to taper for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you can take it easy the day before a race and just sort of treat it as a workout. There's something to be said for racing oneself into shape. Obviously, you can't do that for Ironman. You can't do a bunch of Ironmans. You can't do freeze. You can't do an Olympic distance race every weekend, but you can still, you can do a sprint triathlon, for example, and still, ride long that day or ride long the next day and keep that. There's just, the recovery costs are lower. Also, tactics are important in racing. The best way to improve tactics is to race. So all of this is important. However, if we look at it from a physiological perspective, there's really something to be said for just doing, accruing a lot of training load. Obviously, there's a break point, and you can't just relentlessly pour on load. At a certain point, after a certain amount of time, you're going to have to ease off the throttle and recover anyway. But it is a good time to have a more of a linear progression to training load and push the limits there and just stimulate the body in a different way. But it depends on the athlete. When we think about training cycles, it's true that every training cycle does build upon the prior. And if would somebody perform better in a race 2 years from now if they were able just to train nonstop and build training linearly until that point? I don't know. I think there's something to be said for racing and the physiological benefits of stimulating the body in different ways, focusing on having a VO2 block, focusing on cycling or emphasizing running for a period of time, especially in triathlon where this weird balance across 3 disciplines. But there is something to be said for racing, but there's also something to be said for just literally focusing on training and really putting deposits into that bank account of fitness. I like thinking about it as just putting in like a spoonful of water into the barrel. That is your fitness, and the higher you can fill that barrel up, the better you'll perform. So
and it's dependent on the person too. I think, like, obviously this can be a very hard time for a lot of people that are more susceptible to like burning out in their sport or in life and anything. This time can kind of be a grind. I don't think I'm like that. I kind of have this weird ability to just like grind myself into the ground and like still come out okay. Like I was a swimmer for 20 years. Like I stared at a black line every day. So I don't really get burned out or bored with what I'm doing, especially now that I get to do it outside and go for runs and bike rides and stuff. But yeah, and also the other point is like all of your competitors are in the same boat too. No one else is racing, like it's not something to be like, oh shit, like this is really going to affect the latter half of my season. But like this is affecting everyone. So I think it's important to make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people have more free time, some more time to commit to training.
More free time for coach to put harder workouts on the calendar.
Exactly. And I know that you're in Tennessee now, so the weather is getting nicer, and training is more enjoyable now after a long winter of long cold winter and short days. Yeah. It is a glorious time of the year, so it's at least it's fortunate that this is happening in the spring and not necessarily the winter, where a seasonal affective disorder is definitely a thing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, there is a shelter in place, there is social distancing mandates and everything, but it, you are still, everyone is capable of like getting out of where they are in a safe way, and going somewhere new, doing some exploring, like, especially if you can work remotely, like now is a great time to like get out and go see a new area. That's what we're doing. And, we're being super cautious and safe about it. We're wearing our masks when we go into every store, even in these small town Tennessee areas where no one is wearing a mask except us. We're probably scaring everyone. But yeah, I don't know. It's, for us, we're like, we're really trying to make the most of this. And if you can, I highly encourage everyone to do the same, because it can be a unique opportunity. It doesn't have to be all bad.
That's true, and that's an interesting perspective. And obviously, you're going to have the people who, categorically believe that shelter in place means don't leave your home. But in the U.S. is a pretty big country, and there's a lot of just empty space and space
Yes.
where there are not other humans, and you're going to sort of remote areas and cabins and staying in each place for a few weeks. So it's not like
Yeah, and yeah,
you're
exactly. And
violating any
follow the CDC's recommendations, self quarantine for 4 days, like do those things and be extremely safe about it.
yeah,
Definitely don't go out and explore the country for the sake of exploring right now.
right. Don't go to LA and then hop to San Francisco and Seattle.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just a couple quick fire questions. What is your
Bring it.
race day breakfast?
Oh,
Do you have a consistent breakfast that you eat before a race?
well, yeah. I mean, so not really. Race day breakfast isn't as important as the previous day's lunch for me. I have to have a tuna fish sandwich the lunch before I race. It sounds gross and
That's
sounds like
delicious.
something
Yep.
you wouldn't typically do, but hey, it's a balanced meal, and it gets my head in the zone. As far as waking up that morning, I definitely always wake up earlier than I usually do. I'm an early riser anyways, so instead of 6, I'll wake up at 4 or 5 depending on when the race is. But if anything, just to like eat a good breakfast, something simple like a PB&J, bagel, oatmeal, something like that, something that's just like quick energy, that's not too heavy. But yeah, I don't know. There are some people that, I don't know if you're like, no, you're not like this, but some people just like have a hard time eating on race day, right?
They do, yeah. They can get nervous, and it's tough for them to
Yeah.
keep food down. So, I mean, you always want to eat before a race. Usually, I mean, it depends on the duration, but I mean, before an Ironman, I think it's good to try to get down 1,000 calories, and most of that low residue, high carbohydrate food, sports drink, supplementing with sports drink, and a couple of gulags. That's a good approach. For a sprint triathlon, that 400 to 500 calories is it's good to take that in and to top off the glycogen stores. But I always recommend a bagel with peanut butter and jelly, and a banana and some sports drink. That's always a good.
I'm like the opposite. I'm a nervous eater. I get nervous, and instead of like my stomach shutting down, I'm like, I want to eat more. Especially like when you're going into a race, you're usually not like working out as much. You're tapering a little bit. You're not burning
Yep.
as many calories. So it's like I have to like watch how much I'm eating now. Usually that's not the case. I just like eat till I drop. But
Yeah, that's a good
I have to
problem.
like be a little careful.
I know. So, and then superstitions. It sounds like your superstition is that tuna fish sandwich.
It's the tuna sandwich. Well, I'll have to develop some new superstitions because I had some in swimming. I'll tell you about one of them. This one got a little dangerous, but is before every swim race, I would go up behind the blocks and I would scratch my hands on the surface of the block I'd scratch my forearms on the surface of the block, and that would just get my hands kind of like woken up so I can, maybe feel the water a little better.
Oh, yeah.
But there are some blocks that are like, have like sandpaper like material. So by the end of a 3-day meet, like my hands and forearms would be like bleeding.
Hilarious.
But I wouldn't stop. I had to do it. So I'll have to come up with something like that for triathlon, like just right before the race, like slightly dangerous.
I love it. I love it. If you could have dinner with anybody alive or dead, who would you pick and why in history? Anybody?
I've thought about this one, and I think I was like trying to think about who would I want to have like a very engaging conversation with. But I think I thought past that, and I think like I would just go for who would prepare me like the best meal. And but like would also be an engaging conversation, finding the right balance there. And I came up with Madison Bumgarner. I'm a Bay Area sports fan. Madison Bumgarner, pitcher for the San Francisco, or he was, now he's on the Arizona Diamondbacks. But I watched that guy for a decade pitch for the Giants, and he was one of these guys that like ice in his veins, pressure had zero effect on him. He was one of the best, probably the best World Series playoff pitchers of all time. He had some memorable Game 7 moments in 2014 where he like nothing fazed the dude. He was just like, pitching a regular spring training game versus a World Series game, it just made zero difference to him. And he would have the same demeanor for both, which was extremely competitive, but also just like very focused on what he needed to do. He was an inherently interesting guy, but I don't think he realized how interesting he was. He was just kind of like humble. And also the good meal part, he's a Southern guy. He would provide the Southern hospitality. He would invite me to his farm. We'd have some fresh meats, drink a lot of beer, probably, indulge ourselves for an evening, and probably just talk about, national parks or something. Like it probably wouldn't be a very sport related conversation. We would probably just go like, have a nice dinner.
I like it. And then one last quick fire question. So obviously triathletes love gear because there are 3 sports, gear intensive sports that, we have to buy things for. So what is your favorite triathlon related product, or at least not, if it's not your favorite, something that, you appreciate or like?
Yeah. I think, well, probably 2 things. One is I wake up every morning and have a Stroop waffle. That would be hard to give up. So like that's less of a favorite, but more of like a necessity. I need my like goo Stroop waffle every morning with my coffee. But in terms of like gear, I think like having a road bike is really cool. And I think a lot of triathletes kind of like look past that and need like the coolest, nicest triathlon bike. But like I've often considered selling my road bike. I still haven't to this day, because every once in a while, I'm in New York too. Like I hardly ever use it, but like on those days where I just want to take a bike out and like ride in the park, or when I go home to my parents in the Bay Area, like it is so sick to have a road bike, and you feel like you don't have to, like it's just a mental break from like getting an arrow and training for something and grinding, but just like road bike kind of just symbolizes like open road and freedom. And I think we need that balance in triathlons, because a lot of people are just so heads down and focused and grinding all the time, which is good. I'm like that, but you need the balance. And I think the road bike for me keeps that in check.
That's a good point. No, definitely. I mean, if everything within training is just about numbers and hitting target intensity zones, it can get trying, and it's good to just tap back into maybe the reason we got into sports or riding bikes in the first place, which is just to feel the open
Mm-hmm.
air and to explore and to, just enjoy what you're doing. And a road bike, it's much more enjoyable to ride a road bike than a tri bike.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this was a good little discussion.
Yeah, I enjoyed this.
I'll have to have another fireside chat soon.
Yeah. You're gonna be doing like 10 of like the next 10, we're still gonna be in quarantine, and by the 10th one, your beard is gonna be like down to here. It'll show like
That's the goal. Or I'll have a full-on mustache that goes like this. We'll see. I have to figure out how to have the beard grow faster. Well, good chat. It was a great conversation. Hopefully people get something from it, but enjoy the rest of your weekend. Cheers.